Most people I interview are top pickleball players in the world whose game I admire in the court. Today, I'm sitting down with someone who is not a pro pickleball player. However, this person used many of the same skills pro pickleball players use, such as mental strength, hard work, strategy, and grind, to build a career I believe should be incredibly fascinating to anyone. Now, part of this person's success did come from swinging a racket, not a paddle, though I would better define his career as a nonstop, diverse carousel of business successes spread across multiple industries, powered by entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, and sports. My guest today cannot beat Ben Johnson singles and may not even be able to qualify for the main draw of a pro pickleball tournament. However, I'm excited and honored to say he's the most accomplished person I've ever had the chance to interview. Mark Leschly was born in Denmark and grew up as a competitive junior tennis player. He went to Harvard for his undergrad, where he played #1 tennis and served as the captain for the men's tennis team, and eventually went to Stanford for his MBA. Mark built a career in tennis as he competed on the ATP Tour, achieving a career high ranking of 486 in the world on May 27, 1991, and was also selected to the Danish Davis Cup team. He continued his involvement in tennis, eventually serving as member of the USTA Foundation Advisory Board and Player Development Council, and also serving as the chair of Harvard's men's tennis. Mark started out as a business analyst for McKinsey & Company in 1991, became managing director of Healthcare Ventures LLC in 1994, and from there went on to build a 25-year career in entrepreneurship, management, and technology. Since 1999, he's been the owner and managing partner of Row Ventures, a tech-focused venture firm and private equity firm, and founded Iconic Partners, a Silicon Valley-based principal investment firm working in technology, sports, and media. He's an owner of multiple sports teams and leagues. And near the end of 2017, he became the principal owner, chairman, and CEO of Universal Tennis, and now UTR Sports. So first, Mark, I just want to thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. That was quite an intro, Aaron. I'm tired just listening to it.
I know I was stumbling on my words there, trying to get it all out. I wanted to start by asking, when you were young, did you ever hope that you would grow up and maybe achieve a little bit more in life?
Oh gosh, well, I grew up, I was an immigrant, and came to America when I was 12. I had 3 brothers. My father had been top 10 in the world as a tennis player, and then went into business, had a very successful business career, ended up becoming a CEO of a major pharmaceutical company. So the notion of competing in sports and also trying to drive something successful in other endeavors was sort of how we were raised. And so it wasn't about success as much as it was about, hey, listen, just go have a purpose, go pursue your dreams, and enjoy what you're doing. And sometimes the chip falls nicely. I have lots of fun, exciting things I've done so far in my life, and also had a bunch of failures. But learning from your failures and getting right back up, those are cliches, but they matter. And I think having purpose in your life, I think, is something that's super important.
When you started off, as a young kid, what were your goals, your future goals, and what was your idea of success? And then how have those goals and that definition of success evolved over time?
Yeah, I think for me, it was, I've always been sort of motivated and by sort of achievement, in the sense of being very competitive and just enjoying what I'm doing. It's not necessarily about winning as much as it's about just enjoying what you're doing. So it was sort of how we were raised, as children. And now what I've sort of reinvented myself a bunch of times, from the different things I've done in different careers, and just finding new challenges and finding new ways to sort of be inspired and be interested and be engaged. I think having passion about whatever you're doing at any particular moment in time, I think, is super important. So whether that's on a tennis court or on a pickleball court, as of late, I'm nowhere near Ben Johns, that's for sure. But I'm really starting to enjoy playing that, or whether it's in business, or whether it's being a great dad or being a good husband. Trying to figure out a way to juggle those things is never easy, but it sort of inspires me and motivates me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, most people I interview, pro pickleball players, a lot of our audience, being pickleball fans, are very well aware of. And you're someone I would say has probably a much larger impact on the pickleball world than any individual pro player, at least most. And yet I think you're someone that the pickleball world, the pickleball players and fans need to know a lot more about. So can you walk me a little bit through your backstory, how you got to where you are today, and then lead that into UTR and getting involved and acquiring
Yeah. So as you mentioned up front, I've been involved in sort of the Silicon Valley for a couple of decades now, and about 8-9 years ago, I really started to zero in on the notion of interface between sports media and technology, and that drove me into being involved in a bunch of different sports endeavors in different sports. I found a piece of technology about 6 years ago. It was called Universal Tennis UTR. And it was really an interesting thing that really allowed you to create this language and standard and narrative for the sport of tennis. It was a couple of engineers that had just come up with a concept of saying, okay, how do we build a better rating and ranking system for that sport? And what was sort of 3 or 4 people in a small company, I bought, and we built a bigger, broader vision. Fast forward 5 years, we're 150 people. We have wonderful partners like Tennis Australia and Roger Federer and Novak and Amazon. And we've sort of built an entire infrastructure in tennis that really builds a rating and a ranking that measures the level of players at all levels, from beginning to pro. And then that digitally connects people. And then we give tools, software, event management, clinics, analytics, and you name it, to connect not just the players, but to help the organizers in that sport. And so herein comes that digital sort of marketplace and environment. And it's been a fun ride to build that up. What happened about a little bit over 2 years ago was we then decided to go into pickleball. And I think we had watched pickleball for, the last 4 years or so, and was always super interested in the sport and saw just this phenomenon emerging. But we weren't quite ready. I mean, you got to be careful when you build businesses and not spreading yourself too thin. Incidentally, we had a couple of our people leave our firm, and I got involved in Duper and Jill Braverman and Tito and others. So it was always on our radar. We've been approached over time by a lot of different sports that have wanted to have ratings and rankings and digital technologies to connect the community. But we basically spent the last 2 years building our technology now. We've created some partnerships we'll talk about in a second here to really support this ecosystem. And pickleball is still very much in its infancy from the perspective of digital connectivity and supporting players and clubs and building that infrastructure. And so for us, it's a super exciting time to lean into this sport and to really be supportive and be helpful. And ultimately, we're a technology company, that really drives digital connectivity, personalization, and try to help the player experience and try to help the organizers to make it a better overall sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to dive a lot into UTR, what you guys are doing in tennis and pickleball. I've personally been involved with UTR and have used UTR for many, many years. My good friend, my co-founder in a couple different ventures, Matt and I, we grew up playing junior tennis together in Northern New Jersey. And it was a very competitive Eastern section. And I remember, I believe it was in high school, where our coach at the time said, hey, I know you look at tennis recruiting, I know you look at this and that, but this is what you're going to want to look at for your ratings. This is what matters now. And over time, from high school to college, where I ended up going to University of Maryland to play club, but Matt went on and played D1 at Holy Cross. We understood that this now wasn't just something players needed to think about. This was everything, and something we'll get into later. For college tennis now, I mean, and for a long time, has been literally the only thing coaches look at, specifically because so many players are international, and that's the only scale to really measure international players. So we saw this incredible growth of UTR to become the dominant force in measuring a tennis player's ability. When we started our tennis academy about 5 years ago, we started running tournaments, and we ran UTR tournaments because you guys made it incredibly easy to reach players, to put together events. And we understood from the early on, this wasn't just a ratings company, this was an events company, it was a solutions company. So it's clear the value that UTR has created. And on your end, obviously you've been involved in many different ventures. You understand how to identify a business that has value. But I'm really curious, as we begin this discussion about UTR, again, about why you specifically got involved, and not just from being involved in a good business, but you came in and said, I want to be, I want to come in and come as an owner and really lead the ship here. So what did you see in UTR, and what did you feel like you could individually bring to the table to change the game even further?
Yeah, no, it's funny. Life has different doors and different journeys. When I decided to step back a little bit back from my venture private equity business, I wanted to get into sports, and I sort of saw myself being active in sports. And I co-founded Professional Fighters League and MMA, got involved with the MLS and other things. And then I always wanted to do something in tennis because it was my sport, it was my passion, it was my sort of true inspiration. And tennis is a difficult sport, right? And so what I saw in UTR was initially more of a pet project. It was more like a little fun little thing. And but what I ended up doing was really thinking about, look, if you want to do something to transform or really impact something, the best way to do that is to make it a successful business, right? So it goes from being a philanthropic or a project on the side to being something that can really have long legs. And so the question was, how would we take a little rating system and turn that into a long-term successful business? And early on, what we were able to do with UTR was to convince Oracle to be part of it. We convinced Tennis Channel to say, hey, look, here's a way to connect what you're putting on the airways with every player out there. Of course, there was the collegiate side that I think you summed up nicely, which now has really transformed college tennis, right? Like 75% of all D1 and D3 players are international because it's been a great leveler. Every coaching program now can actually compete from the perspective of identifying talent. Now, can they recruit them and retain them? But at least they can now go internationally. And so for me, jumping into UTR and saying, look, how do you create a language? How do you build a business around all that? How do you scale it? And we've been able to do that successfully. And that's the great thing about entrepreneurship. You can move quickly. And when you have stagnating or sleepy incumbents, who are more about power and control and status quo, if you create something and you open up this door, right, to personalization and ththings, it's not a question of whether you can grow and be successful. It's just a question of how quickly you can do it. And then I'm fortunate to have had 25 years of experience in startups and recruiting people and raising money for that and figuring out how to build business models. And so what originally might have been an intent to sort of hire a team, somebody somewhere along the line said, well, why don't you be the CEO, Mark, and why don't you run it? And I'd had a couple of operating roles along the way. And so I think I probably had intended to ease into retirement, maybe play a little more pickleball, Aaron, but like here I am, and I'm a 24/7 entrepreneurial CEO, and it's a lot of work, but it combines both a real passion that I have to support sports as well as building a successful business, and those are very much interrelated, right? Like if you really want to impact something long term, build a successful business around it so that it allows you to sustain it, and that's sort of the path we're on and have been on, and knock on wood so far.
Absolutely. And I love the energy and the commitment to constantly looking to do things and build and excite. And I think so many true entrepreneurs at heart are never going to quote retire because they're so excited at what they're doing. And just the way you speak about it, I look at my career and my life, and I hope I can say the same things that you're saying, down the road. Some of the questions I ask, by the way, having a pickleball audience, I think they're somewhat selfish because I'm a business owner and I love innovation and entrepreneurship. So some of the questions relate to more, hopefully, our pickleball audience can enjoy them as well. But a few different questions about really building your business. Now, I actually do relate this to the pickleball and tennis experience that we've had. The businesses within pickleball and tennis they're slow moving, they're cemented in their ways. So for example, many tennis and pickleball clubs take payments in person. Now on a much larger scale, you did something in the tennis world against the norm. You changed the status quo, these different NTPR ratings and the tennis recruiting world that people, agreed with and trusted and believed. You came in and completely changed that. So how do you change an industry that is not flexible to change and do it in a way where everybody embraces you and you're bringing positivity and you're not getting all the negative pushback?
Yeah. I mean, look, obviously, when you want to drive change in an industry, you have to really understand, what is the unmet need? Where's the dissatisfaction? What is the process reengineering you have to do? And what's your product to market fit, right? There are a bunch of different things around all that. And by the way, it's not easy, right? I mean, those industries are where they are for a reason. Now, pickleball is a little bit different because it's just tremendous growth occurring, right? So it's got a different set of challenges than tennis, which is very mature. Um, but I think this notion of and what I was able to do, at least with UTR, was to spend a lot of time thinking about, hey, what were going to be the catalyzing changes that were needed in order to really build a compelling platform business and long term. And I think the nice thing about tennis, at least from our vantage point, was that there really was no innovation. There was no technical connectivity. Originally, we intended our platform to be a little bit more direct to consumer, right? The idea of, hey, we're going to create a Strava-like app, right? You can come in, you can discover things. It was going to be more direct to consumer. It was a freemium model, meaning that it's pretty much free. And then somewhere along the line, we can upsell you some products and services. What we discovered was that the ecosystem in tennis was really frail. Clubs, high schools, colleges, the people that organized tennis were not in a particularly strong position financially. And so we need to build support technology in ways for them to be able to support their ecosystem. So, for example, we could go to a college coach and with very minimal effort, they could set up a prospect camp or a camp on our platform. We could attract players into that. All they had to do was to set the time and the price. We had the payment systems, the communication systems, everything around us. So it was sort of a tailored solution for their needs. And suddenly at a moment's notice, they could say, hey, we're going to create a 25-person next Friday prospect camp for Stanford, and they set the price and, and wow, suddenly they could raise money. Same thing in the summers, and here come special events. And it sounds like you're up and running doing it too, which is, hey, look, how do I use this tool to help me with my business objective as well as my clientele? And so we basically have just become an enabler to support the ecosystem. And that's the exact same thing that we now have entered the pickleball space to do. It's a different industry. It's at a different juncture in its evolution, but the need is still very much there, right? There are no standards that are really accurate and appropriate enough for ratings and rankings. There is no software out there that truly helps providers and organizers. There's no leagues of any significance. Yes, there's tournaments, and people talk about pickleball brackets being the dominant market. Well, when you look at the amount of tournaments being done relative to the play sessions, it's infinitesimal almost, right? The amount of penetration currently with organized pickleball, leveraging technology and digital, is still very, very small. And you've seen these very nice point solutions come up that have been very attractive. Playtime Scheduler is a good one where people come in and they can help organize. You got Pickle Play has come up, and but these are really just 2 or 3 people that have come up with a little product, and because of the need for people to connect and help. So I think there's a huge need still. We're in inning 1 or 2 of this industry's evolution, domestically and internationally. And we're going long, and we're super committed to just continuing to build innovation to support this journey for players and organizers. And that's a long-term commitment. It's a massive requirement in terms of time, effort, and resources. And we've invested tens of millions of dollars developing that tech. We're investing more than anybody else.
Yeah.
And I think, this is sort of what we do. And when you get to APP and you get to USAP, we'll talk about in a minute, they recognize right away that, hey, look, this is not a business we should be in. And ultimately, here's an organization, meaning us, that had really proven this successfully. Yep. They know what they're doing. They know they're committed to it. They're incredibly well-funded. They have a good management team, and they're going to create the best possible solution for the sport. So let's partner long-term, and let's go thoughtfully and practically and just execute and go build out the infrastructure needed to support this industry long-term.
Absolutely. And, UTR Sports is all in all a technology company. There are a lot of tech software companies out there that are maybe a outsourced, simple line of code that you might even consider to be more of a marketing branding company. They're taking a technology that is being done in 20 other places, and they're putting a fun spin on it. That is not UTR. You guys are an industry-leading technology company. And so when you looked at getting into pickleball, I completely understand you saying we can build a better product, we can do a better job and service the 50+ million players a year the way they need to be serviced. So my question is not, why or how do you think that you could do a better job? But I know also from being an experienced entrepreneur yourself, you wouldn't just get into a market because you think you can do a better job. You come into markets because you think there's a need. It's not just solving the need, it's there being a need in the first place. So I would love to hear you talk about when you looked at getting into the pickleball world, what was the need? Why did you guys think that you should get into the space?
Yeah. So, when you look at pickleball and when we looked at this starting even going back 4 or 5 years ago, right? It was a little bit of the wild, wild west, right? These pop-up courts were occurring. It was coming into the tennis setting. It was more of a drop-in thing, right? And people were like, hey, they were kind of self-organizing themselves. A lot of organization today happens on a WhatsApp, right? It's not even a text thing, right? And so you look at all of that and you say, look, the profound innovation that we brought to tennis was the notion of creating a system that allowed you to understand what level you're at so the experience on the court could be better. When you compete against each other, so unlike golf where you compete against a course, in tennis, squash, pickleball, paddle, you're competing against other players, and having people on the court that are of a similar level to you makes the experience much more fun. It's not fun beating somebody badly nor losing badly. And so we saw right away that when you look at USA Pickleball's rating ranking system, when you look at what others have done in terms of ratings in the sport, even Duper, and we can talk about Duper in a minute, you find this general dissatisfaction across the board with, boy, this isn't sufficiently accurate to really help support all the levels of the sport, from the elite part down to the recreational. So we immediately saw that, look, we are the world experts in building rating and ranking systems. Like, we've proven that, bar none, what we've done, all kinds of things, and we understand that business better than anybody else. Very different scoring system in pickleball, very different approach in terms of how you build it and how you optimize it. More tendency towards doubles versus singles. But the reality is that we've done this before. And then we said, look, if we can build something as a standard, then that's only the starting point. What becomes next is now, how do you then support organizing and creating the experiences? So the notion of tournaments, events, clinics, leagues, we haven't seen this really proliferate broadly, right? And then ultimately the idea of creating a player-centric community, right? And so we sort of said, look, we can bring everything we've learned, everything we understand, we can tailor it, which is what we spent the last year and a half doing, is building out all of our technologies and making them relevant for pickleball, and saying, look, this adoption curve, it's always going to be slow and it takes a while, but it's just going to keep going to the upright side because we'll keep innovating. And people are screaming out for more support. People are screaming out for, gosh, and they're so used to your generation, the younger generation. They're so used now to having everything at just this touch, right? Like, they want to click on something and say, okay, what are the 50 things I can do tonight? Right? How do I connect to people? How do I post a photo? Right? Like, how do I communicate and engage in this community? And that's our commitment. We are a technology company, but we've also created event pathways. So not only have we decided to say, look, we want to be a technology enabler, but we also want to lead the way. So in pickleball, we've created our own amateur series now. We're working very closely with APP and all things they're doing into next generation and juniors. And now, the golden ticket events they're doing and everything else. We're going to be working with USA Pickleball to do everything with leagues and recreational related stuff. And then, just like we did in tennis, maybe at some point we get into the pro part of the game, although, we don't need to rush in there. I think Tom Dundon and MLP and APP have done a nice job supporting that ecosystem. Kudos to them, right? Like, these are people that committed to make the investment to elevate the sport. But I think when you look around all of this, there's such enthusiasm in this community. This sport's here to stay. It's not a fad. It's wonderful, and I think we're just going to keep chipping away at this for years to come.
Yeah. What you guys are doing is really interesting because there's I'm not sure if it's a common misconception or not, but players that are really play pro, that love pickleball, that are competitive players, we're in this sort of bubble where we follow the pros, we play pro, we watch pro, we think about it. In reality, 1% to 5% of all pickleball players could name Ben Johns or anybody else. 95+% of players are not entrenched in the pro world. That's personally how Matt and I built our academies and how we even built our media company around that 95+%. And while you just mentioned, maybe UTR has a huge involvement in the pro side of things as you're doing with APP now. I think there are a lot of ways you can benefit there. But what you guys are bringing to the sport, I think, is a really, really frictionless way to activate the 95+%. You're helping create events partnered with the APP, and you have a rating system that I think tailors heavily, not just something that can be used within the pro world, but that really helps recreational players understand ratings and get involved in ratings. People that normally wouldn't know what to look for. You built a system that really tailors to that 95+%. So I would love you to walk me through from the actual UTRP rating for the match results and the non-match result rating systems, and just specifically how UTRP is going to connect with players and help them understand their level and their rating.
Yeah. So first off, we spent the last year and change building the rating, and we work very closely with APP in particular. So all the APP results, that data set, all their players from recreational all the way through, and really having a data set to optimize this and build it out. I think the net of that is that we now have a system that's more accurate than the pro rankings for APP, and now has built anybody who's played in APP is getting a rating structure here. But the way this works is that if you come in tomorrow and you're a recreational player and you may have a duper rating or you have nothing, you can jump into our system, download our app for free, and you can immediately be asked a handful of questions, 5 or 6 questions. That's what we call, that gives you a provisional rating. That provisional rating is somewhere in 70 to 80% accurate on what level you're at. So it's actually quite interesting how our science and our data science can put you into the ecosystem. Now, this is a little bit more relevant for the recreational player, the entry player, that intermediate player versus the tournament player, but that allows you to come into our system. And then whether you're competing in events and tournaments or leagues, that's organized by somebody who's then posting the scores, and that will start to generate now a numerical rating for you as opposed to a provisional rating, or whether you're self-posting your scores. What we've developed in our system is a bifurcation, right? That numerical rating can either be a verified rating, and what I mean by that is it's organized play. You're familiar with tennis, what we do there, right? It's basically what we call UTR sanctioned play. It's APP, it's USAP, it's you as a tournament organizer. There's an independent party that validates those scores, right? That creates an objective match rating for you. Duper doesn't have that, right? Duper allows you to self-post scores as well. So what they have is they have a challenge because they have high quality data with low quality data. Now, the other part of that is that if you're just a recreational player and you're never going to play a tournament, right, you can self-post your scores, or you can also pull in some tournament scores, and we'll give you something that's an unverified rating, right, which is a little bit like golf index. You play golf, you can post your own scores, and you have an index. Well, we want to create a standard where there's integrity around all of that, but we also want to create a standard where you can't sandbag and you can't manipulate the system, right? So we offer both. You can have a verified rating and an unverified rating. And now what you have is you have the tools that are needed for recreational play and entry level and fun and social. Here's level-based play. Scores are going in. You can progress and get better. And then for the more competitive side of the sport, hey, we need an objective standard that is more accurate and is better. And so we have the best of both worlds here. And we also built a system out that goes from 1 to 10. So people are like, well, why didn't you make it more like USAP's system? And why can't the numbers be the same? Well, we had to make it a longer scale for accuracy purposes. We had to create enough separation. And without getting into the nuances of data science, this was really something that was needed in order for it to be the most accurate system. And so it's roughly, if you compare USAP's system today to ours, we're roughly 1 point higher. So if you're 3.5 today, you're probably going to fall in the 4.5 thing. But this is going to be a progress and a process to go through this, right? So as we start to ingest more and more results and we build up this ecosystem, people, depending on what your interest is in the sport, can deliver these different ratings, get into our ecosystem, and then look to discover opportunities for play, tournaments. We also have some phenomenal group technologies that we're rolling out now, people to create their own play, to connect with players in their local communities. You're going to start seeing a lot more like a feed-like thing that you're going to see in our mobile apps. So, really trying to create more engagement and all of this stuff, the rating, the feed, the creation of groups, creating a play, it's all free. It's all free for players, right? So, ultimately Duper has a business model where they're going to go out and they're going to charge clubs now pretty soon for a rating in the analytics. We're not. Our system's going to be, I believe, better. It's going to be more robust. It's structurally better approached, and we're going to offer it for free. Why? Because we want to support that ecosystem. And the vast majority of people in our system are going to be there for free. And then there's some people that want to buy some of our products and services. They can opt into those. And that's their choice, as opposed to they're being required to do it.
Right.
So that's the approach.
So could you clarify, would a brand new beginner be a 1 and the best player in the world be a 10? And then also in between, how would a player who's looking at their UTRP rating be able to sign up for, let's say, a tournament on pickleball brackets where they're deciding to play a 3-0, a 3-5, a 4-0 event? So talk about the range and scale of your rating and how players can use that to then compare when signing up for tournaments that use other ratings.
Yeah. So if you're sort of a novice or an early or beginner, at that level, you can come into our system, take the provisional rating, gives you a sense of where you're at, right? It's sort of a measure of what you're likely to be. And then at that point, you can start to participate in events. You kind of know what other players are at. You're set off on your journey. You can self-post your scores. You can self-organize your game. You can invite people into the system. You can create your own group. You can do a bunch of those things that you can operate independently, or you can now start to get involved with organizers that are setting up events and participate in those leagues, clinics, camps, etc. As you get up that curve and you get into people that are more active in tournaments, we are today in an environment where, the world's been bifurcated a little bit between USAP, APP, and UTR Sports versus pickleball brackets, right? And that world there. Tom Dundon and his team have had a mindset, which is they weren't going to share data. I think they very much have wanted to sort of insulate themselves. So today, if you play a tournament on pickleball brackets, they're not likely to use the USAP rating system, which is ours, right? And they are not willing to give us those results. Right. So in that sense, there is going to be a little bit of this as well, but for the time being, that's okay. If you want to play in those tournaments and they'll have an entry system, or whether it's Duper or something else, fine, have a Duper rating, have our rating. Like, this is ultimately for the players that are out there. What's happening right now is that formidable businesses are lining up to invest in this industry. And you as a player, as an organizer, are going to reap the benefits of that. Right. And as long as you're sort of open-minded and figuring out, hey, what's the best solution for me? What works and resonates the most? You'll have choice. That's a wonderful thing. We support that because we think at the end of the day, we can provide the best solution. But what you're going to see now is there's going to be a mass proliferation of more and more events in our ecosystem with USAP, with APP, with what we're doing, as well as other providers that we're going to invite into our ecosystem. So I think the notion of just getting more and more events, more and more things organized, more venues are being built out. The infrastructure is still very much in a growth mode, right? Many of these facilities are inundated just with drop-in play. So you'll see more and more organized events. Tournaments typically in industries are actually a smaller fraction relative to leagues and other structured play. So we're going to see this whole evolution. And I think our counsel and our advice say, look, we're in it for the long haul. Download our app, start to engage in what we're doing. Just watch us grow and take advantage of whatever we offer you. And if you can find other solutions elsewhere, great. But we're ultimately striving to be a comprehensive solution for all your needs as a player and as an organizer. That's the journey we're headed to.
Part of what helped UTR become such a successful tool for college coaches and really players all over the sphere in tennis was that nearly all USTA tournament and league results and college matches and now high school matches were adopted into the UTR system. So the result was, people saw it as the 100% most accurate, reliable system because it took everything into account. So, and I understand part of the hurdles here may be that the PPA is not actually sharing that data. Now, I'm not sure, maybe those results can still be scraped from Pickleball Brackets websites, but what is the vision in terms of being able to have a rating system that that includes all matches being played, or is that not part of the future vision?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think from our perspective, I've spent a lot of time with Tom Dundon and that group there, and we'd love to partner with them. We'd love to be supportive. You know, they came out a couple of weeks ago and said that Duper was going to be their system. You know, I think that there's obviously some self-interest there, overlapping ownership, some other things that are occurring there, right? And I think ultimately, at least for the time being, this sets up a little bit as a conflict. But I think the reality is that now, as we're rolling out all of our events and we're scaling things, you know, we're going to very much focus on this grassroots broader thing. You know, the pro side of this equation gets a lot of the media and the airtime, the high visibility stuff, everything else. But it's, as you said, it's like a 1% of the play, right? Even the tournaments that are on Pickleball Brackets, as you sort of add them all up, it's a very small number in the larger scheme of things, right? So the growth of this industry, the growth of events, the growth of tournaments and leagues is yet to come. And we partnered with two organizations that are truly committed to building that out. The governing body, which is needed, and we need a nonprofit governing body to provide leadership and infrastructure. Mike Neely is a terrific CEO. He's come in there. He's a year in. He's reshaping that organization. He's setting up these golden ticket events and the recreational down through it. We're going to be launching leagues and other types of events with them. We got the whole junior space, super early still, but a wonderful to start to see young people coming into the sport now. It used to be just tennis players that abandoned it. Now it's everybody. And of course, the collegiate space, and both of those spaces we're very familiar with, Aaron. So I think what you're going to see now is we're going to get more and more events. We already have hundreds and hundreds of events on our platform, right? And those are clubs that are setting those up. Now we're going to see a growth in sanction play, if that's what you want to do with USAP. And APP is super committed to building out this grassroots. So
Yeah.
whereas PPA and MLP is very focused on the elite part of the game, you know, our primary focus here is really going to be in the grassroots and supporting the masses.
Yeah.
And then we'll decide how far up we want to migrate over time. APP is already up there and we're supporting them. But, you know, we're also doing golden ticket events. I didn't even mention that to you. So we have this amateur series, but we're also doing golden. People are like, why are you doing golden ticket events? Like, aren't you a technology company? Well, so USAP wanted investment. They wanted partners. They wanted support. So we said, look, we can help. We can do that. Let's create more experiences for people. So I think that is how we sort of see the coming years. And this is a long process, right? This isn't like overnight. This isn't instant gratification. You got to be committed to this. You can't be a flyby.
Yeah.
You know, you got to operate, you got to execute, and you got to be committed.
And what you guys have done within tennis and pickleball illustrates the importance of a technology product coming in and building really immense partnerships with other brands and service providers within that space. No company is too big for any partners. You know, I think partnerships really will lift the tide for all boats. And you guys have done this in tennis. You've partnered with Novak and Federer's investment firms. You're partners with, you know, Fabletics and Tennis Channel. You know, Oracle you had mentioned, and you came into pickleball and in a really short period of time have partnered with two of the premier organizations in the entire sport, USA Pickleball, the governing body of pickleball in the United States, and then APP, an organization that, you know, myself, my co-founder Matt, have been very close with for a long time, from, you know, Ken Herman when he started the APP, really getting to know him over the last few years, you know, to their whole team, you know, Tom and Mike and all those guys. They're a great organization. So I'd love to hear those two distinct partnerships. What you know, what is the vision for how those two partnerships play out, and what's the magic being created by those two individual partners?
So, you know, both of those partners, and we started talking to APP, gosh, it's been a year and a half plus, right? Like I think what, you know, obviously the Intersport guys out of Chicago partnering up with Ken Herman, and Ken, you know, what an evangelist for the sport, what a dedication and commitment. I mean, he's got a heart of gold in terms of just wanting to see this through. He's so committed. And they want to create a long-term profound impact on the sport. And they recognized very early on that to do that and to be successful with it, they were going to need a very robust technology innovation and partner. And so right away, they recognized what was currently available in the marketplace wasn't adequate and wasn't going to service their needs. Not to mention the fact that with the PPA and MLP sort of lining up, that was going to be somewhat competitive, right? And a lot of the oxygen was going to get squeezed out of the room. So that partnership for the last year and a half has actually been unfolding, working very closely on a weekly basis to develop our technologies, to optimize it. The team that they built out now with Melissa McCurley and Nicole and, so many others on that team is a really seasoned, knowledgeable operating team that understands the sport from an event operations perspective. And so that partnership now just is going to continue to unfold into every form factor. So we've announced we're going to do leagues together with APP. We're heading into the next gen and junior segment. We're going to be doing more and more on the collegiate side. And also, we're going to look to focus internationally, support the ecosystem outside the U.S. And so that was sort of barreling along, and they selected us as being, say, look, this is the partner to go to, given our history, given our commitment, et cetera. And then USAP went through a comprehensive review process themselves as the governing body, saying, look, we are a governing body. We don't have the benefit of a massive sort of USTA tennis like US Open or PGA type of thing. And so they said, look, we can't afford to invest in technology, but more importantly, that's not our expertise. And so they selected us as the partner not just to be the ratings partner and the ranking partner, but also to be the tournament, event, league, and recreational partner to say, look, how do we proliferate out events into these communities? And then ultimately, USAP is the leading governing body, NGB, around the world. Pickleball is and has been sort of the dominant element in the sport right now. That's expanding now. And so for them to provide leadership to the globe. And so we're just super excited about, when we entered tennis, we didn't partner with any of the governing bodies. Like we partner with Tennis Australia now, but even the USTA, everything we've done in tennis was despite the USTA. The USTA with all their money, Aaron, and everything they're doing, and yet look what we've done, right? So it just speaks to the fact that when you create innovation, there's opportunity. So both of these partnerships are truly great organization committed to the proliferation of great experiences for players and organizers. They're totally synergistic with our mission, and we want to add more and more partners to this ecosystem. And we're off and running. So this is the announcement was the easy part. Now here comes all the execution and the growth, right?
Yeah. Something I'm really curious to hear your perspective on is the social impact of ratings in sports, and specifically social sports like tennis and pickleball. Ratings is deeply cemented into the conversation around the sport, the egos of players, even sometimes causing positive or negative points in friendships and doubles partners. So you guys coming into the sport now, being able to further the mission of what ratings will do to pickleball, how do you see the social impact of a growing rating system?
I mean, the most important thing about all of this is to creating something that has accuracy around it, right? I think taking out subjectivity, taking out, most people are honorable, have high integrity and character, but, there's always a couple apples, in the barrel, right, that can spoil it, right? And so we've seen this in tennis leagues. We see it in other leagues where people come in, you play tennis, let's say you're a college player and you haven't done anything in 5 years, you get recruited and playing some really low level USTA league and you're just a total ringer, right? Like that's not fair and equitable, and it sort of spoils it because, two people want to desperately win, right? So the notion of bringing something in that truly creates accuracy and the opportunity for level-based play for everybody involved is so important to the social dynamic. It's been so interesting for me to immerse myself into pickleball now, because one of the wonderful things about pickleball is that there is competition at every level. You go to a national championship, there's like 75 divisions, and it's like age and gender, and then here's your different levels all the way. You can become a national champion at different levels. That doesn't happen in other sports. It may happen at an age level, but not at a level based as well, right? So the notion of having accuracy around all of that and saying, look, if you're going to enter an event in a national championship based on your gender and your age, it should also truly be reflective of your level.
Right.
Right. And that level means you need accuracy. You need something more robust that stands above reproach. Yep. Right. And can't be manipulated. It's a little bit like you're trying to get recruited into college tennis. A college coach needs to trust that the results that are in a database that creates a rating is accurate,
Right.
right? And so that's why the social dynamic here, if you're competing, is super important for accuracy. For the purpose of the recreational player, it's more about how do I introduce you into this setting in a way that makes it fun and enjoyable. The problem with tennis, just as another anecdote, of the kids that enter tennis tournament, for every 10 players that enters, only one plays another event. I mean, that is just a terrible, terrible
Wow.
experience, right? And so the whole notion of introducing people, that's why the notion of provisional rating, the notion of saying, hey, where do I fit in this ecosystem? How do I start to have a fun time? So important socially.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I haven't seen the data, but I would predict the number is much higher in pickleball because there's a percentage of kids playing tennis who are forced to play, and with pickleball, it's an adult making a conscious decision. So I would hope that that number would be higher with pickleball. Now, I've been really, really excited about UTR since you guys got into pickleball, and I've loved you guys since you started in tennis. And I've been really, really excited about working with you guys as well. There's one question I've had since you guys got into pickleball that I've asked my friend Nina, who I work with, quite a few times, which is, what is the deal with the name? Because you're UTR Sports,
Yeah.
you standing for Universal Tennis Rating, and yet that name is the name on top of pickleball. I'm curious, is that the long-term vision for the name, or how do you see that fitting into creating a world-leading pickleball rating, which I hope you guys are, I believe you guys are on a path to do.
Yeah, I think so. When I first bought the business, it was the notion of, it was called Universal Tennis, actually LLC, but the brand that was known was really UTR. And I think that we talked about rebranding it back then, but it already gained a little bit of traction, right? I think as we've entered other sports, the notion of having the company be Universal Tennis is not a fair depiction of our commitment to the sport, nor how much we are looking to service multiple sports. So we've now become UTR Sports. I think we look at UTR not so much as what it means, UTR. It's really more the brand, right? UTR is a brand that's synonymous with creating a high integrity narrative language and standard for the sport that is not just a rating, but also a series of other technologies. That's really what UTR now is become as a brand. And so for us, UTR relevant to tennis, UTR relevant to pickleball, UTR relevant to paddle or badminton or rackets or whatever it may be over time. And I think people recognize UTR more and more so now. Certainly juniors in tennis and other sports. The hope now is in pickleball. And with that brand comes a recognition that, hey, this is high integrity language for the sport, a rating, a ranking, but then also community and a marketplace and a series of other technologies. And so we don't focus on what UTR stands for as much as it's a brand in and of itself. And that's why it's actually UTR rating. It's UTR pickleball rating now, right? And that now is people more and more so now, certainly in the world of tennis, everybody knows what UTR is, right? But in the world of pickleball, that's also going to be the brand.
Mm-hmm. With about 10 minutes left, I have a couple of these more selfish questions that, as someone I look up to, even after this conversation up to this point, there's just so much that you must have learned across all of your different ventures. And I believe all of which involved finding the right people to move your ventures forward. Outsourcing and incentivizing and being able to delegate are things absolutely needed to build even a small company and, of course, many large companies. So my question to you is, how do you find the right people to delegate to and to build your team?
Yeah. Well, and look, that's a continuous process. It's never one where you just crack the code and it goes on. I think that we also live in a much more challenging environment now where most people work remotely in tech companies, right? We are 100% remote, which makes it very, very hard to touch and feel and interact with people. So finding people who ultimately are excited, feel that there's a sense of purpose behind what they're doing, look beyond themselves and want to be part of something more holistic. Having the right psychology to want to work with you and be interactive in this. We have people that are both sports people, have been involved in tennis and pickleball, and then we have people that have never played the sports, and that's okay. But the other part of that is also the recognition that people usually are in different cycles in their life and their journey. And, somebody can come in and be incredibly productive for 2, 3, 4 years and then look to transition to something else. And that's okay, right? Like, I think the notion is more openness, communication, having alignment, having a sense of really caring. The notion of finding people that want to take the initiative, as opposed to just follow all the time. There's a lot of psychology in there about, hey, do you feel that you're part of something bigger? And recruiting and retaining and motivating talent is a continuous work in process, Aaron. And it's very expensive when you bring the wrong people to the team, both in terms of actual output as well as impact on an organization and other things. And it's probably the hardest thing to do, particularly when you're a high growth firm, because you're hiring and you're moving quickly, right?
Yeah.
But there's old sayings that it's fun to build business except for dealing with all the people issues. Well, I actually look at the people part
I
of it
love
as
them.
super fun. Yeah, it's super fun.
That's my favorite part.
Figuring out how to motivate. My one personal pet peeve is I wish I met with my team more, right? But because we're global, and just the practicalities of getting together, regularly, just makes it super hard. But, people enjoy the flexibility of operating remotely, but it also puts a different burden on you in terms of how you interact.
Yeah. Speaking of sayings, they say, if you have something to do, give it to a busy person. And I think that applies to maybe the more average person. Someone's doing a lot of research. Okay, give them a little bit more research. But I'm not sure. I wouldn't have guessed that applied to if someone's already managing multiple investment companies and is involved running a lot of other businesses. Let's also have them buy and lead a technology company. You're doing so many things. You've done so many things. It fascinates me. I'm wondering, how are you able to focus on and be successful with so many ventures at once?
Well, so I think, look, I've done a bunch of different things, but I think as I've gone through that, you do have to get rid of things, right? You do have to focus. So right now, I'm all in on UTR Sports, right? It is 95% of what I do. I've really tried to compartmentalize the other stuff. So even though I have some toes in other stuff, you really got to focus your time and attention. I think one of the great challenges, whether it's you personally or your family or your relationships, is that so spreading it too thin with peanut butter kind of thing doesn't work, right? Like, you got to really make sure that you're spending the time to really do something well versus a bunch of things at a mediocre level. And that's hard, right? You're trying to be a good husband. You're trying to be a good dad. You're trying to be a good friend. You're trying to be a good son. And that's just on the personal side. And then here come all the things, and, figuring out how to balance your time effectively and productively and get you motivated in the morning. That takes constant evolution,
Yeah.
and whatever phase you're at in your life. Right. And there's a lot of pressures that get put on you. And then there are things that are self-interesting to you. And it's probably the fun journey of life.
There's a common debate about the greatest player of all time in tennis, the GOAT, between Federer and who he is as a person and his dominance at the top, Nadal as a warrior, as a fighter, Djokovic, who probably unarguably has the greatest career of any tennis player. To you, who's the GOAT tennis player?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've had the pleasure of meeting all of them and getting to know all of them. And I think, they're all just extraordinary contributors to the sport. Roger is a bond, he is the actual gentleman that his brand projects him to be. He's the nicest, most thoughtful guy you could imagine. Rafa, his commitment and dedication. I think by now, from a pure tennis perspective, I mean, I think Novak has demonstrated by virtue of his Grand Slams, his dominance across multiple surfaces, that I think it's hard to argue that he isn't the greatest of all time. and even though that gets controversial in certain camps, having said all that, I mean, they're all goats. I mean, why do we just have to have one goat? Why does that narrative have to come up, right? Why does it have to be one? It's a little bit, I saw a thing the other day on social media about Caitlin Clark. Oh, she would do great in the NBA. Like, why are we even having that conversation, right? Like, hey, let's just celebrate what amazing individuals and sportsmen that they are. But Novak has been a friend and a great support of what we're doing. He has such intellectual curiosity outside of tennis. It's part of what gets him into trouble at times. He's not as simple in the media world and gets portrayed in different ways, like Rafa and Roger, who of course are just such exemplary standards in the sport. But what he's done in tennis is amazing. It's going to be fun to see what happens this summer as we head into Wimbledon, the Roland Garros, French Open, and more importantly, the Olympics.
Right. Right.
So we'll see.
Right. You have 5 skills listed on your LinkedIn. Not that many people update their LinkedIn too frequently, but you have 5 skills: management, leadership, entrepreneurship, startups, and venture capital. Which skill do you think contributed most to where you are today?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I don't think either of those actually, or any of those. I think ultimately what ultimately I think is the most important thing is just motivation. Like I think, as I tell my kids and they joke with me, success is no accident, right? And they joke, well, nor's failure, dad, right? Like, so, but I think the notion of saying, look, if you're truly committed to doing something, and if you truly have the motivation to do it, and you're prepared to do more than the next person, right? Then I think that ultimately perspiration is a huge part of success. And the hardest thing sometimes is to make the decision to go do something. Once you've made the decision to do it, then you're just executing, right? And with that comes sacrifice and other things. But to me, the notion of motivation and drive and commitment, so the softer qualities, having a sense of humor, having a sense of humility, and being able to influence others in a positive way and to make them want to be part of your journey. That's what you usually find. Those are usually the characteristics that you don't necessarily see on resumes, but you find are usually common amongst people that have been very successful.
Speaking of resumes, if my resume at the end of the day looks even fractional compared to yours, and the impact that I make is even anywhere close to the impact you've made on the world of business, the world of sports, I would be incredibly pleased. I really appreciate your time and coming on. Mark Leschly, CEO of Universal UTR Sports.
Yeah, well, it's very nice of you to say, Aaron, and thanks for everything you're doing. Sounds like you're off and running, building your own business there, and obviously excited to support everything you're doing. So thanks for having me on.